car, let's talk about what we replaced. Underneath the hood here, if you remember early on in the videos, the cross member was completely toast on this. We changed out the cross member. We changed out the front clip. Changed out the headlight buckets. Changed out the leading edge here. Fabricated wall sections in here. Changed out all the floors. Reconstructed the pedal box assembly. Changed out the rockers. Changed out the lower quarters all the way around. Changed out the gas door. Changed out the rear balance. Changed out the trunk floor. Changed out the spare tire tub. Changed out the deck lid. A whole lot of changing out. Step nose GTs are getting very expensive. This is kind of the reason why they're getting very expensive. There's very few of them out there that are in tip-top shape when we purchase them. And those who've experienced that knows what it takes to put one of these back together. This particular car, the person who owns it, it's a labor of his love because he's owned this car such a long time and it's reminiscent of his past. He wants to preserve this car. And that's why we're going through all of this. If you think about everything I just said as far as how much we had to change out in this car just to save it, for most people, that would be an impractical decision. For some who are ambitious and want what they want, it's nothing. There's your update on that. Now what we're going to go to is we're going to talk about how we're updating the doors, meaning more so the hinge systems on these. Okay, so this little green guy comes in and out all the time for little service updates and things like that. One of the things that we're doing with this is it had a speedo problem. The speedo cable wasn't driving the speedometer, allegedly. So one of the things you can do if you have to diagnose the same problem is don't assume it's the actual cable just yet. What you do is you disconnect the speedo cable at the transmission, attach it to your drill, hit the drill in reverse, and you should see the speedo actually move. If it moves, it's not the cable. It's not the speedo itself. Which means the only other thing it could be is the actual speedo drive gear, which is this. And if you look down inside where the actual speedo goes in there, if that is rounded out, there's your problem, okay? And this is what you have to do to solve that problem. Take a pen drive and you remove the gear. Then you're going to tap this down ever so slightly. Don't fully knock it out. There's no reason for you to. And at that point, you'll expose the compressions, or I should say the depressions that are actually in the cradle where the speedo drive cable connects to. Okay, so at that point, you would take this and you would re-crush those. If you re-crush those and square it up effectively on the inside, when the cable goes back in there, now it has the ability to actually turn this, okay? This is a fairly common problem. I've replaced a mini cable, but I've also found a many of these to be the actual problem. So once you press that back together, you drive that pin back down. Don't forget to drive that compression ring that's in there down as well, because there's an oiler that goes right here, okay? Make sure when you put this back in the transmission, that is lined up to the oiling mechanism that's in the inside of the casing, which is on the top. You'll understand it when you're doing it, if this is what you got to do. Other things we had to deal with on this car is a fan. Notice something? It's missing one. If it was just missing one, and we have a 6 blades, you're looking at about 17.5% cooling capacity down, but you're also looking at unnecessary vibrations that are going to be transmitted not only through the motor, but it's going to wear up the water pump really fast. The other problem that was associated with this car, and you should probably take a look at it on yours if you have this was sitting pretty far back from the radiator. It can't do its job if it isn't close enough to the radiator. When we pulled this off, we noticed there was no shim on the back. So earlier in this video, you saw me turning on the lathe an aluminum hub that sits inside this on the new one. That way we're pushing this closer to the radiator. This needs to be as close as you can get to the radiator without contact, okay? So right now our new fan is approximately an inch away from the radiator. Okay, that is very relevant to its ability to have the cooling capacity. So now we're in the summer months, this is the kind of things you look at. A, make sure that your fan is not only has all its blades, but it's not chipped. Chipping also adds wear and tear to the water pump, okay, because now that fan is technically out of balance. Just a few little things you should think about. The other thing you saw in the video is you saw that we installed the Darson header. I've already taken this car on a test drive with that header. It's really woken that motor up. The other thing we did with that was we removed the center section of the actual exhaust. It was rusty, it had a bunch of pinholes in it, it needed to go. We changed that out with just straight pipe. So now all we have is the actual exhaust tip, the mid muffler, straight pipe instead of the third, which is directly under the seat pan, and then the header. It really freed up the motor for a whole lot more response. So we'll take this car on a test drive either today or on Monday, and you can get a sense of what it's all about with that new throttled out motor. Anyway, so the tech tip is, if your speedo isn't working, don't assume it's the cable. Again, put the cable onto a drill, flip the drill in reverse, the speedo should move. If it doesn't move, it's the cable or the speedo. Don't diagnose it to be the cable this day, because taking the cable out is actually kind of a hassle. Disconnect it from the speedo and then hit the drill again. If you see the drive at the speedo side turning, it's the speedo. So drill, reverse, speedo should move. If the speedo doesn't move, disconnect the speedo from the actual head of the speedometer and see if the gear inside there, I should say the cable, is actually turning. If it's not turning, then it's the cable. The other alternate is this. So there's 3 components that make the actual speedometer work. And don't assume the cable is the most common culprit, because it isn't. I've had plenty of these have this problem where this gets hogged out. It's an easy fix. Again, all I'm going to do is recrush the squareness of this, and it's going to work fine. And that's that. Speedo's working. And so now we're going to take it on a little test drive. You'll get to hear how this thing kind of comes to life as soon as you get around 5,000 RPMs. That's a bit of an addicting sound, so we'll see how it goes. Excuse the noise, about an awful lot going on today. You've probably seen our videos before where we talk about how to rebuild the hinges. If you have a pre-72 car in the States, your hinge looks like this. If you have a 2-liter car in the United States, your hinge looks like that. What's the difference? This basically is cutouts and the construction. The later series cars, brass bushings, steel pin going through them, they don't really wear out all that easy. Earlier cars, plastic bushings, steel pin going through them. Now you're probably thinking that doesn't look too bad. You're probably thinking that looks fairly straight, but the reality of it is not. When the bushings break away on these, what happens is the pin takes the brunt of all the energy of the door opening and closing. Inevitably, it starts to bend. These are only made out of aluminum. So, if you look at it like this, you think, okay, that's not that bad. But look closely. You see how out of alignment this is? Right here? That's way out of alignment because this is bent. It's not to suggest that the later series cars don't have the problems as well. Here's a later series car. If you go with the one area that is machined right, you can see that it starts to bend pretty bad right here. Okay? So, what do? Well, we happen to get lucky enough that we stockpiled a few of the later series hinges, and we love to use those in lieu of the early style hinges whenever possible. These don't necessarily need to be rebuilt, but I do need to separate them, and I need to get these squared again, because if I don't, when I go to put this on a car that this wasn't a part of, when you go to line up that door to the quarter panel, style lines are way off. So we got to rebuild these. This is the holy grail right here. This is the later series limiting strap. Every GTV that ever comes through here always has a big old dent that's underneath some body filler, and that's because the early style hinges, the limiting straps would break. When they broke, the door would hyperextend, hit the front fender, and leave a permanent crease there. Because it's right behind the door framing, it's impossible to straighten by conventional methods. You have to do some pretty aggressive techniques to get that out. And back in the day when these cars weren't worth that much, people weren't going to pay for that. Anyway, the replacement vulcanized early limit straps aren't all that great either. So you're really forced to do this. 2-liter hinges with 2-liter limit straps, the door won't break. So we're going to rebuild these, square them up. I'll show you how that is. Okay, this is the biggest reason why the 2-liter hinges last much longer than the earlier series cars. Those right there. These are brass impregnated bushings. So they just don't wear out. The hinges stay lubricated. They don't work against one another like the plastic ones did. They just last. But effectively, the only reason why we're tearing these 2-liter ones apart is because this baseline on these are not square. This one in particular is extra bad. So we're only separating them to straighten these out. Once these are straightened out, we're reassembling them, blasting them in the cabinet, and they're ready to go on the GTV that we're currently building for somebody else. Whereas, if you have an early series car like this, later series one were plastic on the early series ones. And when those things start to decay and break up, the pin now no longer has that plastic sleeving, so the pin literally just instantly has a ton of slop in it. That's why we deal with them. And again, the only other reason why we really like the 2-liter ones is because you get a way better limiting strap system that doesn't fail and it doesn't wear out. You got to modify the door pocket a little bit to receive this, but other than that, that's it. So, what we're going to do as you can see, that's way out of tolerance. We'll straighten these out on the press, assemble them, that's it. Okay, so now that we have pulled these apart, straightened them, blasted them, and reassembled them, I put them on the belt sander here just to kind of deck the back side of it a little bit. What that's doing is showing me the highs and lows. These are casted, they're not going to be perfect, but the thing of it is now they are very flat against one another. And I put those against straight edge and I'm going to find the same results. Now you can put these on the car. Had we not straightened these out first, the problem you would have ran into is you probably would have had to put shims behind it to compensate for the distortion in the hinge itself. This way we're not going to need that. Now we can go ahead and put these on the car. It's relevant right now because now what we have to do is we have to modify the pockets on those early doors to receive that improved hinge limit strap. And once that's done, the doors will get hung on the car and now the car can get blocked as one. You never want to do full-fledged body work on your car without the doors on, latched, style lines addressed. That way when you're blocking on it, the car will be uniform. If you're to block the doors off the car, the style lines aren't going to be right. So it's just one of those tech tips. Reconstructing hinges. This is the 2-liter series hinges that we basically tore them apart, cleaned them up, took care of some distortion on the hinge plates themselves. Then we decked the back sides of them so they sit very square. That way when they're attached to the A-pillar on the car, they're not influencing how the door acts, meaning whether it's to sit high or low, if the style lines can be above or below where it should be, whether the gaps front and rear are too far out. It's a real easy thing to kind of miss yourself on. If the door gaps are not right, odds are the hinges are shot. If the door sags and drops, it means that the pin system's probably shot. Just little things to know. But one thing is certain, the 2-liter series cars had far better hinges. The hinges themselves effectively looked very much the same, but they were quite different. And we already talked about the bushings, the brass bushings and the pins, and here is the later series limiting strap, far superior to the earlier. Now Johnny's going to show you in a minute what this is all about, but he started on this one. As you can see, the holes are still existing in this one. This is a very thick plating system because this is effectively how the hinges are not just ripping the door apart. There's a lot of heavy steel behind this. So what Johnny's done is he's welded up these holes on this one, and he's already put the pilot holes for this on these. So what we're talking about here is if you can secure these 2-liter hinges and limit straps, you should go for it. But there's a lot of work that's involved to make this fit, and you're going to need a few special tools. And Johnny explained what that's all about.
Well, like Darren's mentioned, you can see what we got going on. This is what we started with. You can see the distance in the two. See where these holes are compared to these studs. So what we have to do is, we can't just take a Dremel tool and try to oblong these holes. That's not the right way to do things, because what you're doing is you're making this small stretch of metal here very weak. So what you want to do, as Darren mentioned, there's a thick plate back here. I mean, it's about a 1/4 inch thick. It's pretty thick. So what we do is we weld this up really hot weld so we get really good penetration. Then what we do is we mark where we need to drill the holes. We have to measure everything out, and we have to make sure that we measure it right, because if it's too high or too low, it's not going to line up with this guy here. So you want to make sure that it's going to be in the right location. Now, after we've drilled the pilot holes, we're going to drill the right size holes that we need for this. The fitment back here to fit your hand is really, there's not very much space back there, so it's kind of difficult. Like we said, there's really stout steel, so it takes a while to do this, but doing this is a great choice because, I mean, some of these straps, when they come in and we do a restoration, we sandblast a car, they're shot. I mean, they don't function anymore, and you absolutely need these. Why? Because if you don't have them, if you just happen to open your door on a hill, or there's some wind, or for whatever reason you swing this really lightweight door open too hard, what you're going to do is you're going to dent the door skin. You can see it on this door. That's already happened. So we had to fix it, right? This is why. Okay, so you guys are looking at a close-up of the installation of this later series hinge on this early series door. So what we had to do is we had to drill our pilot holes. We drilled the holes for the studs to go through for the check strap, and now we've got our pin in place where we need it to be, and that's going to hold that check strap up to the hinge. So here I am going to close it. Now I'm going to tap it right on the center, right where that hinge pin is at, because I don't want to bend this. Again, we just got done repairing these, so this is just for an example so that you can see how it closes. Like so, nice and stiff. Notice how I had to give it a little bit of force to go there. You want that because you want this hinge pin to be strong. Okay, you don't want it to be something that's weak and it's just going to move around on you. If you open the door, your kids open the door, whatever, and somebody just swings that door open, you don't want it to go flying. Again, why? Because it might break that pin, and then you're going to get a dent right on that door skin.
rebuilt the hinges. We don't have any shims whatsoever behind these, okay? It's just the raw, natural hinge as it was from the factory. And the key here is, again, I can't emphasize enough, just the mere fact that we have straightened out the blocks, the hinge blocks themselves, and we decked them. When I say decked them, we basically just put them flat once they were assembled onto the belt sander so it cuts the entire surface as one and makes it nice and straight. Okay, you can't compensate for the casting, so when you go to straighten these things out, they're not going to ever be perfectly straight. That's why we decked them. Anyway, so now that we decked them, now that we made the mod for the new limiting straps and everything, and I bolted them on. It's just a rough bolt on, but let's see where we're at on it. Okay, so my area right here, and the area right here, leading edge here, leading edge here, are all pretty squared up. The most important thing though is this style line is clean front and rear. Why is that relevant? If I were to do all the mud work and sanding and blocking on these and I had them off the car, when I go to put them on the car, if the car was done at a different time, what's going to happen is this style line and this style line are not going to jive. They're going to look very, very different. You never want to do a full cut, which means blocking and sanding the car disassembled. That's not a good idea. You block it as one, it becomes increasingly relevant that it's blocked as one when you go to paint the car. If the car is to be something like metallic of any kind, what happens is the metallic will lay down differently based off the sanding techniques. And the door can literally look like it's a different shade of something. So this is all important stuff. The bottom line is it doesn't hurt the value to improve the hinge. You won't ever have this happen to you again. There's no downs to this, the exception of that the hinge system is kind of hard to find. Now, these cool metal limiting straps, something to know. The Alfetas had them, but they're slightly different, but they still work. This requires you a little more thought process when you go to put them in. So if you get the 2-liter hinges and limiting straps, great. If you still need to find the limiting strap section, which is not produced, you can use the Alfeta version, but again, it requires a little more work than you would think. It's not that hard of a job. Think about it, you'll be able to work it out. The bottom line is, this car, which has went through hell and back to get to this point, is now ready for its body. It was a good day.